Namaskar, good morning friends, and welcome to this special briefing on Prime Minister's visit to three countries, Rwanda, Uganda and South Africa from 23rd to 27th July. To do the briefing, I have with me Secretary Mr. T.S. Trimurthy. I also have the Joint Secretary East and South Africa. And after the briefing, we will have some time for question and answers as well. Sir, the floor is yours.
Distinguished members of the media and my dear friends, I would like to welcome you all to a briefing on the three-nation visit by Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, to Rwanda, Uganda and South Africa. Prime Minister will be in Rwanda on 23rd, 24th July, Uganda on 24th, 25th July, and South Africa from 25th to 27th of July. Prime Minister will be accompanied by an official delegation. A large business delegation from India is also expected to be present during the visit. The visit of the Prime Minister to these three countries is a reflection of the intensity of our engagement with Africa and the priority we attach to our relations with African countries. Our engagement with Africa has clearly intensified over the last 4 years. You would recall that we had received more than 40 heads of state and government at the third India-Africa Forum Summit in October 2015 and several more heads of state and government during the International Solar Alliance Founding Conference in March this year in New Delhi. We have also had an unprecedented 23 outgoing visits to Africa in the last 4 years at the level of Honorable President, Honorable Vice President and Prime Minister. Prime Minister himself has visited 6 African countries and will now visit 3 more. Under our Africa Outreach Initiative, we have had visits to all African countries at ministerial level. As regards Rwanda, this is a historic visit since it will be the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Rwanda. Rwanda is an important gateway to Eastern Africa, and we have elevated our bilateral relations with Rwanda to the level of a strategic partnership in January 2017. It may be recalled that President Paul Kagame visited Delhi in January 2017 to participate in the vibrant Gujarat Global Summit, and later in March 2018 to participate in the founding conference of the International Solar Alliance. Rwanda has signed and ratified the framework agreement of the ISA. Recently, this month, we have had the visit of the President of the Senate of Rwanda. During his visit, an MOU on parliamentary cooperation was concluded. This is the first MOU signed by the Rajya Sabha. Several ministerial visits have also taken place for advancing and strengthening multi-sectoral cooperation between the two countries. India will also be opening our mission in Rwanda very soon. It is worth mentioning that the President of Rwanda is currently the chair of the African Union. He had been chosen earlier to lead the African reform process in 2016. You may recall that Rwanda hosted the Assembly of the African Union in March this year in Kigali, where the African Continental Free Trade Agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area was signed. 44 members of the African Union signed the agreement. When ratified, the agreement would be the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the WTO. Rwanda is the third largest troop contributor for peacekeeping in Africa and plays an important role in the UN mission MINUSCA in the Central African Republic. Rwanda has also been a recipient of our lines of credit of nearly 400 million and of our training and scholarship programs. Solar electrification of 35 schools in rural Rwanda was completed in 2014 under a grant from the Government of India. A vocational training institute was also set up in Kigali under our assistance. During this visit, we expect to conclude 2 lines of credit, one of 100 million for development of industrial parks and Kigali SEZ, and another one of $100 million for agriculture and irrigation. As regards the program during the visit, PM will be received by President Paul Kagame and a ceremonial welcome will be accorded on arrival. Other elements of the program include restricted and delegation level talks, banquet dinner hosted by the President of Rwanda, paying homage at the Kigali Genocide Memorial, and interaction with the Business Forum, and a brief interaction with the Indian community. An important element of the program would be the visit to Ruweru Model Village for gifting of 200 cows as a contribution from India to the Girinka scheme of Rwanda. Girinka is a social protection scheme of the Rwandan government, personally overseen by President Paul Kagame. The poorest families are gifted dairy cows by the government, and the first female calf born of the cow is gifted to the neighbor, thus promoting brotherhood and solidarity. We expect agreements to be concluded in the areas of defense, dairy cooperation, leather, agriculture, and culture. As regards Uganda, the Prime Minister will proceed to Uganda on 24 July. This is the first bilateral visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Uganda since 1997, after 21 years. Our Vice President had visited Uganda last year in February 2017. Prime Minister had visited Uganda in 2007 in his capacity as Chief Minister of Gujarat. Since taking over as Prime Minister, he has met President Museveni several times, with the last one being on the sidelines of the Commonwealth Summit in London in April 2018. President Museveni has visited India twice on state visits and once on an official visit in October 2015 to attend the 3rd IAFS, as well as 4 times in his personal and private capacity. Uganda is currently the chair of the East African Community. It was under the Ugandan chairmanship that the EAC summit was held last year. It may be recalled that the CII Exim Bank Regional East Africa Business Conclave was held in Kampala in November 2017. Prime Minister of Uganda had visited India in March 2017 to attend the CII Exim Bank Conclave, where Uganda was the guest country. Honorable Vice President of Uganda had also visited India in March this year. There are over 30,000 Indians and persons of Indian origin in Uganda. President Museveni is credited with inviting many among the Indian community to return to the country, assuring them of their safety and security. He has also been hosting the Indian community for Deepavali dinners in the State House. Training and capacity building have been the focus of bilateral defense cooperation. India has an Indian military training team stationed in Jinja since 2010. In Uganda, the elements of the program will include a call on the President, restricted and delegation level talks, banquet lunch hosted by the President of Uganda, an India-Uganda joint business event. The President will address the Ugandan Parliament. This will be the first time that an Indian Prime Minister will address the Ugandan Parliament. His address will be telecast live in India and in many African countries. Prime Minister will also address the Indian community, where President Museveni is also expected to attend. We expect to extend 2 lines of credit for the first time to Uganda of US dollars 141 million regarding electricity lines and substations, and US dollars 64 million for agriculture and dairy production. As regards South Africa, on 25th July, Prime Minister would proceed to South Africa. The visit to South Africa is mainly in the context of the BRICS summit. Apart from participating in the BRICS summit, Prime Minister will have a bilateral meeting with President Cyril Ramaphosa. This will be the first visit by the Prime Minister to South Africa after the new administration led by President Ramaphosa assumed office in February this year. The year 2018 is a very significant year in that it marks the 125th anniversary of the Pietermaritzburg incident of Mahatma Gandhi and the 100th birth anniversary of Nelson Mandela. You will recall that External Affairs Minister had visited South Africa last month to inter alia commemorate this historical event. South Africa is organizing the 10th BRICS Leaders Summit under the theme BRICS in Africa, collaboration with developing countries for inclusive growth and shared prosperity in the fourth industrial revolution. Prime Minister will participate along with other BRICS leaders in the following sessions: restricted session, plenary session, leaders retreat, outreach with leaders from Africa, outreach with leaders from Global South. In addition, South Africa has invited the following leaders to participate in this summit. In the BRICS Africa outreach, those invited include Rwanda, Uganda, Togo, Zambia, Namibia, Senegal, Gabon, Ethiopia, Angola, and the African Union Chair. In the BRICS Plus outreach, the invited countries of the Global South include Argentina, Turkey, Indonesia, Jamaica, and Egypt. The UN Secretary General has also been invited. As regards the issues before the 10th BRICS Summit, they broadly include the following: BRICS in Africa, particularly inclusive growth, fourth industrial revolution, multilateralism, global governance, health and vaccines, socio-economic empowerment of women, peacekeeping, network of science parks and technology, inclusive growth, sustainable development, infrastructure, youth, and cooperation in multilateral fora. BRICS leaders are expected to discuss, inter alia, global hotspot issues, international peace and security, global governance, trade issues, etc. during the restricted session. BRICS National Security Advisors Meeting report will also be presented to leaders in this session. In the plenary session, leaders are expected to discuss the fourth industrial revolution, its opportunities and challenges. Being countries with huge youth population, cooperation in the area of education, labor, industrialization, etc. would be of considerable benefit for all the BRICS countries. Leaders will also have an opportunity to interact with the BRICS Business Council representatives. BRICS Business Council report will be presented to the leaders in this session. The NDB president, the New Development Bank president, will also report to BRICS leaders to brief on the year's proceedings. This is the 10th BRICS summit. For the first time, a BRICS leaders retreat is being organized on this occasion, where BRICS leaders will deliberate and take stock of BRICS cooperation during the decade and on its future prospects. In the outreach segment, various African countries have been invited under the theme BRICS in Africa. This will give us an opportunity to share with our developmental experience with our African partners. As I mentioned earlier, chairs of multilateral groupings such as Argentina, G20 chair and Mercosur member, Indonesia, co-chair of the new Africa-Asia Strategic Partnership and an ASEAN member, Egypt as the G77 chair, Jamaica as the CARICOM chair, Turkey as OIC chair, and the UN Secretary General have been invited to interact with BRICS countries on inclusive growth and the prosperity of Global South. Prime Minister is also expected to meet some leaders bilaterally on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. As you're all aware, India attaches importance to its engagement with BRICS, which has emerged as a valuable forum for consultation, coordination, and cooperation on contemporary global issues of mutual interest, and has helped promote mutual understanding. During our BRICS chairmanship in 2016, India introduced the idea of people centrality and round-the-year engagement in BRICS. India had, besides the meeting at political level, introduced people-to-people engagement in BRICS by organizing BRICS Games, Youth Summit, Films Festivals, Traditional Medicines, Disaster Management, Women Parliamentarians Meeting, and many such events all around our country. We are happy to note that these ideas have been taken forward by successive BRIC chairs. This concludes my remark, and I'll be happy to take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have time for a few questions. Siddhant?
So, two small questions. One, you mentioned that the Prime Minister is going to meet some leaders. The Prime Minister is going to meet some leaders. There will be some bilaterals. Will this BRICS summit in South Africa?
At this point, we don't have a fix on bilaterals and with what country. Definitely the matter of BRICS rating agency will be discussed during this BRICS summit. And what the outcome, we'll have to leave it to the leaders to decide.
We will take the next round of 3 questions. Akhilesh ji?
Sir, you mentioned about
Yes, please. David?
To be a defense cooperation agreement. Could you elaborate on?
Just a follow-up, how far do you expect to take a defense cooperation pact? And on the same issue, Prime Minister will reach maybe a few hours after President Xi Jinping takes off from Rwanda. Is there a sense that what we're seeing in Africa is now a sort of competitive altruism between the two countries?
I think on the hotspots, this is not really for me to comment what issues they will discuss. They have also, for example, a retreat as well. So there will be a range of issues discussed. But you've also seen the outcome of the discussions of the foreign ministers of BRICS, where some of these issues were touched upon. So I'm sure that those issues plus any other issues which the leaders decide to take up will be discussed. As far as the defense cooperation with Rwanda is concerned, once again, this will be a very broad defense framework agreement. And the bilateral security and defense engagement with many of the countries in Africa has in fact been stepped up in the last 4 years. And but let me also underline the fact that our defense cooperation with African countries have been very close in the last several decades. It is not a new thing. You may recall that one of the first training institutes established by India in Africa was in Ethiopia in 1958. And you also know that we have very close relations with defense forces of many of the African countries. Many of their defense chiefs, for example, were trained in India. So I think, and also we have defense cooperation agreements with almost all the littoral states of the Indian Ocean. So therefore, when you're looking at India as being one of the largest peacekeeping UN peacekeeping forces in Africa, and we have training with many of their forces, and we have joint exercises and others. I think, and also keeping in mind the Prime Minister's own Sagar doctrine on maritime security, I think it is natural that we are looking to enhance our engagement on security and defense cooperation with the countries in Africa. And this defense cooperation, we see it in that context of enhancing our defense engagement, particularly with a strategic partner like Rwanda. And that brings me to the next question. Yes, we have the strategic partnership of, which we signed in 2017. And I don't see it necessarily only in the context of the defense cooperation agreement, because the strategic partnership is a much, much broader concept, which includes security aspects, but it also includes a range of other things. And we certainly see Rwanda as an extremely important partner in Africa, because apart from being the president of the African Union right now, the chair of African Union, but they have also in many ways been the gateway to Eastern Africa. Rwanda itself is taking very, very progressive steps in the economic sphere. When you look at the ease of doing business, for example, they are very, very high in this context. And there are also many areas of synergy which we see with Rwanda. I think that is the context in which we see the strategic partnership.
You're saying it's a gateway, but
No,
what exactly does a defense cooperation
I didn't say defense cooperation is a gateway. I said that the Rwanda is a gateway, but the defense cooperation is a framework agreement. And I think there are a few aspects under it which we will be looking at with Rwanda. At this point of time, we are fleshing out the details. And as far as China, I don't think we see ourselves in a competition with China in Africa at all. Our relations with African countries goes back a very, very long way. Goes back to history, goes back to Mahatma Gandhi, goes back to apartheid, and now it is on very, very solid foundation of development cooperation and security and other cooperation which is enlarging. So I don't think we look at this relations with African countries through the perspective of the relations with another country.
Venkatji.
Thiru, in the past BRICS summits were used to have separate meetings of the RIC, Russia, India and China. Has that practice been stopped, or is there going to be one RIC meeting of the three leaders? Number one. At one point of time, there were a lot of other countries which were interested in joining BRICS. Is there any plan for expansion of this group, and which are the countries which want to join? Thanks.
We will take two more questions before we conclude this briefing. Tripti.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Mr. Trimurti, I didn't quite catch the name of the social protection scheme which you said is personally supervised by the President of Rwanda. And I want to understand more about what our contribution would be to this scheme.
Any other question? Last question. No, I think we just have two, sir.
At this point of time, I do not think that a RIC meeting is being contemplated during this summit. But this is something where it is evolving, because at this point, I don't think it's contemplated. And as far as expansion, I don't think there is any expansion per se which is being contemplated of BRICS. But as you know, we have a very robust outreach program. And this time it includes not only African countries, but it also includes the Global South. The program, it's called Jirinka program, and it has been initiated in 2006 by the President of Rwanda, Paul Kagame. And this came out because he had seen a large number of children under 5 years who were malnourished. And I think he felt that he needs an initiative in the context of a national social protection program. And his target is to, for example, this year his target is to cover about 350,000 families. And so what happens in the thing is our contribution would be to give about, at this point, I think, initially about 200 cows. And this is primarily focused on giving each family one cow. And this, apart from other revenue which it gets, but the first, the calf is presented to the neighbor. And I think that is how this scheme gets promoted. At the same time, in a country like Rwanda, it also promotes brotherhood and solidarity. I think, and this has been one of the very successful initiatives which the president of Rwanda has taken. And we felt that this was, since it had President Paul Kagame's very personal type of involvement, that we should also get involved in this. And the Prime Minister is actually traveling specifically to go there and present from our side as well. No, at this point of time, we are buying local cows because we are, our contribution would be to buy them and at this point present.
Thank you, sir. On Zerinka program, we have a one-pager which we will share with you on the WhatsApp group. Thank you, sir, for the briefing. Thank you, Nina, and thank you all for joining.